Hey guys, today I have a very important educational video. It's actually been one I've put off for a while, but I absolutely know I need to get done because one of the most common questions I get, just beyond what date was this gun made, for Walther PPs and PPKs, again, pre-1946, for Walther PPs and PPKs, one of the most common questions I get, what is the proper magazine that needs to be with my gun? And that's the educational video I want to do for you today. It might be a little mundane. Usually I like to make you laugh a little bit and tell you a story. This one is strictly business. So let's get down to work and go through all the variations of Walther PP and PPK magazines. Okay, let's get started. You better strap yourself in here because I have a lot to cover. And let me start off with an introduction. This is actually more like a table of contents. Because I just want to tell you probably the best way to review this video because I want to go into a lot of detail and you may not need a lot of this detail. So what I want to cover is pre-war PPs and PPKs, the different variations. I also want to cover wartime PP and PPKs. Then we have, I want to do a section on box mags if you want to know about that. And then I have specialty mags, which would be the different colored mags and magazines used for engraved guns. I want to talk about the numbered mags, which tended to be special purpose mags, and which mags would have been numbered and how would they be numbered. I want to cover 9mm PP and PPK magazines, also 22 caliber PP and PPK magazines, which are probably the hardest to understand. So that one will probably be watched by a lot of people. 25 caliber magazines, which are very, very rare, only a few guns known, and so I will show you a 25 caliber mag and the unique part of that. And then finally, I'm going to do a how-to video on how to swap out the mag bottom. I tell you all that because, first of all, I recommend you watch the video once. But then later on, if you just want to see how to take the mag apart, you can just fast forward to that section. And I'll put up a blank screen. As I enter each section, I will put up a blank screen. And that way you can kind of page through the video so you don't have to watch the whole thing. If you're interested in the 25 caliber mag, you could skip all the way to the end. So this is the table of contents on what I plan to cover. Okay, first section is going to be pre-war PPs. Let me go over some variations here. The first variation of pre-war PP is slab bottom with open follower. Now, I should start off by saying that all pre-war PPs and PPKs are banner only. Here's what I mean by that. If you look at the very bottom, let's get it info, there it is. You can see it has a Walther banner on it. All pre-war PPs and PPKs only had the Walther banner. Most of them come with a flat bottom like this. So flat bottom, they're almost always high polish. That's the typical bottom. But then they also offer finger extensions, both PPs and PPKs, and that's what I want to talk about a little bit here. You can have a flat bottom with a open follower, but more commonly in the early guns, a lot of them are bank guns. So the bank guns, I'll talk about numbering later, but you can see this is numbered, and you probably can't read it, but I'm going to read it for you. It's 750, 127. Now, it started at 750,000, so this is the 127th gun made in the Walther factory that was a PP. So a PP, very early, slab side, open follower. Now, the open follower, you've never seen one. They're goofy looking. And it's a very poor design because when I go to load it, it gets caught right here. It gets caught and it doesn't work very well. So the open follower only lasted for the first few months. So this one is within the first 100 or so. And I would say probably within the first 300 to 400, they would have a open follower like this, but they got rid of it pretty quickly. So this is a very rare mag with the open follower. The only reason you'd want one is if you were an avid collector and you just wanted one because they're the earliest variation. Then very quickly they went to the closed follower. Now the advantage with the closed follower is it feeds a lot easier. See, it goes up and down, feeds right in there. The closed follower was the next variation. So this is slab side, no lip. We're going to talk a lot about the lip. There's no lip, slab side, no lip, banner only, closed follower. So This is variation 1 with the open follower. Variation 2, slab side with the closed follower. This I just have here, this is also a variation 2, but I want to show you a little bit about the finishes. The finishes are confusing. I know you think I know everything, but I can't really answer this question because what I've found across the board are some of the earliest PP and PPK magazines are high polish. This one is a high polish mag, and this one is just as early, but it has like a dull finish to it. I don't know why the difference. This one is also, this is, remember the open follower? This is the earliest of the magazines, and this one is not that, it's not really high polish. Certainly not as shiny as this one, which is a later magazine. So it is confusing. The only thing that I can, if I were forced to explain it, I would say they didn't care. This was considered an internal part, so the external was high polish, but they didn't care about the internal so much. The one thing that I know for sure across the board is the bottom of the magazine, they were always high polished. So this, I guess if I were a German manufacturer, I'd say, okay, this is the outside of the gun, needs the outside, the exterior finish needs to match, but the inside was not that important. And so my guess is they just used a dull finish for the interior part of the magazine. All right, now let me go to the third variation of pre-war. This is, they started indenting. This is what you mostly see. Those of you who collect Walthers, you probably have both PP and PPK that has the indented side and no lip. If you're wondering what the heck am I talking about with the lip, you're going to find out in a minute. So pre-war, the third variation would be indented with no lip. And then the last variation on pre-war is indented, notice banner only. All pre-war were banner only. Indented, thin lip. Let me hold it this way. See the no lip versus the thin lip. This has a thin lip. If I run my finger there, it gets stuck on that thin lip. Now a little later, they're going to add some Botox and we're going to have a thick lip. But on the pre-war, they had no lip. I'm trying to get this better in focus. There we go, there's some good lighting. Pre-war period, we have no lip or thin lip. Now, what time period are we talking about? If I go to the first variation, we're talking about, out of sequence. If I take a look at each one of these mag bottoms, they first came out in 1929, so the open follower only was produced in the first few months of 1929, and then for a couple of years they did the slab side, so maybe that takes us up to about 1931, 32, then they started indenting them, 33, 34, and the last of the pre-war were in 1939. So the span is from 29 to 39, about 10 years. Now, this is my word of caution. A lot of collectors obsess about not having the right magazine and they switch them around. But bear in mind that these magazines were just thrown in a bin. And when they have a bunch of magazines in the bin, and so let's say it's 1938, and we just came out with the thin lip, but in the bin, I have a bunch of these old ones, and so I'm just reaching in the bin, grabbing a magazine bottom and sticking it on a magazine. So nobody was worried about, oh, did I get the right lip or not? Did I get a slab side? So you will see variations. My rule of thumb is if it's within 1 or 2 variations, it's fine. If you're talking about 2, 3, 4 variations apart, like you have a gun that was made within the first 100 and you have a thin lip, then I'd say we can do better than that. But I would not obsess about making sure your magazine was right. I'm just giving you a general rule of thumb. This is 1929, goes all the way up to about 1939 with the thin lip. So now we've entered the wartime and they made some significant change on the magazine. In that they have the Walther banner, but you'll see that they added the model. you can see that they added the model PP and the caliber 7.65. This is a very necessary change because before, when it just had a Walther banner, I noticed right away that I often make the mistake that the only way to tell is by holding it like this, and I can see this is a PPK and this is a PP. Because it's not written on there. So when the war came along and they had all these magazines stored, I guess some genius came along and said, hey, let's add the model and the caliber because we don't want to get them confused. So that's what Walther did in around 1940. So the easiest way to remember it is if it's Crown N, pre-war, it would have banner only. If it's Eagle N, wartime, it generally should have the model and the caliber. Now, again, don't be obsessive about this. Certainly in 1940, they were still using up the old mags. They didn't throw them away. So you don't have to make sure you're exact. But if it's 1943, 44, certainly by then, you should have a wartime magazine. And so here's the variations. First of all, during the war, you would have a lot more flat bottoms because these were not being ordered for commercial use. So for many collectors, they think it was really cool to add a finger extension because they think it looks nicer. So they take their wartime Waffen-proof gun and they add the finger extension. And the wartime, the Army issued guns, they ordered them 500, 1,000 at a time. They did not bother with the finger extension. Same way with the police. They, other than there's a certain police gun, the PDM, the Police Department of Munich, they did order them with the finger extension. But most police, and I would say rule of thumb, if it's police or military, you should not have a finger extension. So I end up telling collectors, stop putting finger extensions on these guns, put them back to a flat bottom. But let's go over the variations of finger extensions. Now, 1940, they still use the thin lip. Here's a wartime gun from about 1940. They still had the thin lip. So the thin lip went from 1939 through 1940. And then they added the thick lip. I have no idea why, but you can see thin lip, thick lip, and then throughout the war, up until probably about 1944, they still made thick lip. But my guess is that by 1945, they weren't even bothering with finger extensions. So most late war guns, even late 44, early 45, they're all going to be flat bottom because nobody cared about the little pinky finger. Now this magazine, you probably already noticed, this is somewhat rare in that it is a phosphated tube with a high polished bottom. Phosphate, at the end of the war, they were experimenting with phosphate finishes at the Walther factory. And so this is a rare mag. It's actually worth more because it is a phosphated tube, late war. This has to be from 1945 because it also has the W, you can see it right there, has the W right there, which means soft metal. They were skipping steps and they actually didn't bother hardening the metal. And so this is just marked to say that it's soft metal and it is phosphate. So this is a rare magazine from 1945. So here we span the period of time from about 1940 to about 1945. Okay, so you might think, well, we're really getting deep in the woods now, but it's going to go a little faster because there's a lot of repeat on the pre-war PPK magazines. First and foremost, they started making PPKs, and again, this is the standard flat bottom. Most of your magazines are just going to be standard flat bottom. The theory is that every commercial gun came with one flat bottom and one finger extension bottom. We have boxes. I've showed you box guns, and usually there's a spare mag. This is in the gun, and this is the spare. So I'm just basically talking about the differences in the finger extension bottoms. Now, we don't get an open follower because remember, this is 1931 was the first PPK, and 1929 they stopped making that open follower because it was a lousy design. So the first variation is going to be slab side, remember, just like the PP, slab side, no lip, and this is a solid color, meaning it's not mottled like the grips are mottled. This is not mottled, it's a solid color, and that's going to be important as we move along. I'm going to do a whole separate video on the grips, but I just wanted to show you the color. Okay, this next one is similar. It's slab side, no lip, but you can see the bank number. This is to a bank gun, and the bank arsenal did crudely number them to match the gun. So I just wanted to show you that these are, that was for a bank gun. They're almost always really early, and this is an early 771 serial number. And then it went to a solid color, indented. So you see the indentation. It's a solid color still. There's no lip, and it will look like this in the gun. So we have a mottled grip, but a solid bottom. People get confused by that because they think maybe it's fake or there's something wrong with it, but there was a very short period of time where they went from this to the mottled bottom, that they made a solid bottom indented. Now the time period, this is again 1931, 32, this is probably 33. By 1934, and this is, remember, your RZM PPK came out in 34, 35. Every RZM that I knew had not been messed with, it came with a indented side and no lip. So this is the magazine that goes with your RZM, and probably all the way up to 1936, probably into 1937, because they didn't throw them away. But then they went to the thin lip, just like the PPK. We added the thin lip. You can see the difference. No lip and thin lip. And this takes us up to about 1939. So the span is 31 to 39. These are the variations. Okay, now we've moved on to the Wartime PPK finger extensions. Bear in mind that most of your guns are just going to have a flat bottom. Again, military and police are just going to have a flat bottom. Notice the high polish, this is dull. And that's what you're going to see in most of your guns. But when you're looking at the finger extensions, we have the mottled, thick lip. And actually, this is 1940. You will still see some thin lip. I don't have one in front of me right now, but I do see the Caliber and the PPK on the tube with a thin lip. So in 1940, they were still using up the thin lips. They didn't just throw them away. But by 1940, they started moving into the thicker lip. I throw this one in here because the brown went from a tan to a dark brown. Again, I'm going to do a separate one on the grips. You can see that the grips become darker, and therefore the thick lip also, I call this a chocolate brown versus the mottled brown. It doesn't match exactly, but you can see that it is getting darker. Notice the difference. It's starting to get darker. And then lo and behold, you've probably heard of the infamous gray grip. Not infamous. You've probably heard of the famous gray grip. Here's one, just came in today. This is brownish gray, but that just came in today. And most of them, here's a perfect example. Absolutely correct. This is a Police Eagle C, has to have a flat bottom. This is a grayish grip, grayish brown grip. Get the coloration like that. Oh, that's even better. Look at that. Isn't it beautiful? And I just happen to have a gray finger extension, thick lip, Wartime Caliber. Does not go with this gun, but actually would go nicely with a commercial gun that had a gray grip. Doesn't that look great? Very, very rare. I've only seen a few of these, so please don't write to me and say, can I buy it? I don't want to sell it. I've only had a few. And then more commonly, by the time we get to end of 1943, beginning of 1944, we do see the black. Of course, by then, they're using the black grip. In 43, 44, they're using the black grip, and always it would come with a black finger extension. Again, thick lip, Caliber, and model. So those are the later war variations. Now I also want to prove another point, or give evidence of another point. My theory is that they stopped making PPKs in 1944. They continued with the PP because that was preferred by the troops, but they stopped making the PPK in 1944, which is why you don't get a W mark. You will not find a PPK with a W mark like the 1945 PP, and the quality of the grip and everything, and they still had all the features of the 1944 gun, when they stopped making the PPK. So this would be, the span of this would be 1940 all the way through to 1944, but not 1945. Okay, so I can't do this video without talking about the post-war differences. I didn't mention that in the introduction, but just now realized that I have to tell you about the post-war variations because people get these confused. And there's about a $100 difference in the magazine, so that this magazine is 120 to 140. This magazine is 40 or 50 bucks. So the best way to tell is look at the font. This does have the Caliber, and it says PP. It has the Walther banner, PP, and the Caliber. You can see the font right there. But look at this one, actually a PPK, but the font is a little different. Here's the most important difference. There's no slash. If you look at the MM for millimeter. On all of the wartime ones, it'll either be Walther banner, or it'll have the Caliber, and there's always a slash in the MM. And that's the quickest way to tell. When I'm walking a gun show and I see this, I say post-war right away, and that drops the price significantly versus the MM. Also, the bottom, how do I know that that's a post-war bottom? Much harder to tell. I'll be honest, a lot of people get it wrong. First of all, a lot of them come with the solid brown color, and that's easy to spot. The solid brown color, these are all post-war, and the black would be hard to tell because here's a black wartime versus this is the black wartime. This is a post-war. The curve right here is a little bit more squared off. This is a little more tapered. That's the only thing I can advise you is this one is a little more tapered and rounded, so it's like a half moon. This one is more squared off. Is it hard to tell? Absolutely. It's easy to take the bottom off of this and put it on a wartime PP or PPK, and it would get past most people, including me. So you do have to watch out for that. This is post-war, this is wartime. It's a little easier, obviously, on the brown. It's easier to see. Here's a brown thick lip versus two post-wars. You can see how this is much more rounded, and that's easier to spot. So you might want to study that a bit. But the easiest thing is the mottled color. They didn't do this post-war. They can't really replicate this very well. I've seen the attempts to fake these, and they're just not good at all. Same way with the party leader grip. They try to fake that mottled look, and they just can't do it. Okay, now let me go over the box mags. There's very few of these that were made. It was a commercial option, and they were expensive at the time, so not many people order them, and they still are expensive because they're so rare. This is an example of two of them on the gun. The Walther PP, this happens to be a Tyrolean PP. I did a whole video just on the Tyrolean, and you can see the box mag fits in here. It does not extend the magazine capacity. So the capacity is 8 with a flat bottom, it's 8 with the finger extension, and it's 8 with the box mag. The only thing the box mag does is when you hold, it just gives you a little more room, does not extend. And for that reason, it was not a real popular option, and they're rarely seen. But if you ever do see a box mag, these sell for about $800. On the PPK, they sell more like $1,000. And again, they would be the mottled brown. They do fake these. You can see here that it matches pretty nicely. They do fake these, but they can't get the coloration right. So you usually will see a solid color or a darker brown. This one doesn't match perfectly, but this happens to be to a 22 caliber, as is this one. But I've seen just as many on 7.65 guns. And again, the capacity here is 7 rounds. Whether it's flat bottom, finger extension, or box mag, it's still 7 rounds. Now, if you happen to be lucky enough to have one of these, don't pop these in real hard because this is very, very thin lip. You want to be very careful with thin lip, and when you pop it in there, you just want to make sure you put it in there gently. Okay, that's called the box mag, and it was a rare option for commercial guns probably in the 1936 to 1939 time period. Once the war broke out, people didn't care about these anymore. Okay, in our next section, I want to talk about specialty mags. Of the oddest of all the specialty mags, meaning just different colors that are not normal, the two oddest that I know of are the red mag and the green mag. I've had a couple of green mags. I had one recently and thought I would never sell it, but somebody money whipped me. You might know what that means from one of my earlier videos, but I was money whipped to get the green one. Here's a picture of a green one. It's a little faded, but most of the green ones I've seen are real bright green, almost like this red, where it's a glow in the dark green. The ones, they're all early. Some of them are numbered, and they all match, they all seem to match bank guns, numbered to a bank gun. So the green may have been issued to bank guns. It's just hard to say for sure. I just don't know. Collectors have been talking about it for years. What do they, where did they come from? Why did they make them? Nobody really knows. It's just the oddest thing. And the same way with the red. Oh, before I go to the red bottom, if you happen to have a green bottom and you want to sell it, please let me know. I've been looking for one for a long time. I do have several of these red bottoms. Again, very odd, very mysterious. Most mag bottoms come with blued plate. Every red bottom I've ever seen comes on a nickel plate. And this one, bottom is nickel plated, and it's on a nickel plated magazine. Now you'll notice, again, every red bottom I've seen is slab side, no lip, and this one is an open follower. So I have to conclude this was made for a special presentation gun that was nickeled very, very early. Looks very cool, by the way. I have seen a nickeled gun with a red bottom, and they're very cool looking. This was just a spare that I picked up at a gun show. The guy didn't know what it was. These can sell for a lot of money. And just one other, let's do some forensic on this one. Wartime, that doesn't fit. Still silver, nickel. Slab side, no lip, something's amiss. Well, the story on this one, GI in the factory at the end of the war, put them together and brought it home because he thought it was cool. Now that's the only story that makes sense to me. Wartime with a very early, I'm just going to leave it alone, leave it like that. But that's just a magazine that I have. Here's another specialty mag. Goes to a nickeled gun with a white bottom. There are white grips. I have a lot of engraved, not a lot. I never have enough. I have some engraved guns. Here's a silver engraved, white grip. Now again, special order, but it is factory. Comes with a engraved bottom, flat bottom, and this magazine. Now you'll see this magazine in silver plated, thin lip, banner only, thin lip, probably made around 1938, 39. And you know that because you've been watching my videos. And one other, I do have some ivory bottoms. This is like an ivory slab, no lip. So these are just unusual mags. If you come across these, don't write them off right away. They might be worth a lot of money. But those are just some of the specialty mags that you'll encounter. Okay, moving right along, this section is on numbered mags, and this is very important because generally Walther did not number their mags. People with commercial guns contact me and say, I'm looking for the matching mag to my gun. They don't exist. They did not number. Most of the Walthers that were made were not numbered mags. However, they did sometimes number mags by special contract. So if you have a magazine that is numbered to the gun or otherwise numbered, it was probably for a special contract. So the known special contracts that we can talk about is, first of all, the SS guns. The SS guns were generally, and I'm going to speak in generalities, the SS guns were numbered on the spine. And I'm going to do separate videos on the SS guns, but if you have a spine numbered There we go. If you have a spine numbered PP or PPK, chances are pretty good that it's SS if it's matching to the gun, of course. And I could take this magazine and put it in any gun, and I can't call it an SS gun. But if I find the gun to match this, then I know I have an SS gun. It's a very complicated process finding out what contract it came from. Obviously, you can contact us. We'd be happy to hear from you, and if you give me the serials. I keep track of serials and have a growing database. I'd be happy to help you out. But generally, spine numbered are going to be SS guns. Then also, and I've already shown you in the other videos, that some of the early guns were numbered here on the finger extension. These are generally bank guns. In fact, I don't know any other contract that numbered it here. These were not done at the factory. I believe they were done at the bank arsenal. They are pretty crudely numbered. Oh, I should go back to the SS. These are factory numbered magazines. So that's important to note. And then the only other contract that I want to emphasize now is the Luftwaffe contract. Generally speaking, if it's numbered on the bottom of the magazine, this gun would be Waffen-proofed, indicating it went to the military, but the fact that it has a numbered magazine indicates that it went to the Luftwaffe. Other Waffen-proof guns will not have numbered mags, so generally, guns that went to the Army, and I would presume the Navy, although I don't know of any Navy-issued guns, any ones that went to the military other than the Luftwaffe did not have numbered mags. But generally, the bottom numbered mag is Luftwaffe contract. Here we have one that's kind of unusual because you can see it's 9mm, 9mm, and 2 matching mags. I actually have this gun, and we'll be doing a separate video on this 9mm Luftwaffe contract gun. So that's pretty unusual. Now, those are all the factory numbered magazines that I know of. Of course, I did say this is probably not factory, but there are other guns that are numbered, and those are usually police. Generally, the magazines that are numbered on the side, and sometimes they'll be on the toe. I'll call that the toe. Right here, you'll see 3 digits, or you'll see a full number here. These are usually done at the police arsenal, and these would be police numbered, not factory numbered. Here's the best way to tell. They're always pounded in there pretty strong, so they look really deep. Look at, and usually there's a dent where they put it in there because the magazines were hardened, and then they went to the arsenal, and when the arsenal put them in, they had to pound them in there pretty hard. And so they almost always dent the metal. And so you'll see that on the toe numbered, you'll see a dented metal, or it's even bent. This one isn't toe numbered, but these are numbered on the side as compared to the, let's take a look at the factory number. They're usually not dented, and they're very light. See, it's a very light strike on soft metal versus pounded in after it's been hardened. So these are not factory. They're almost always going to be police, and they're almost always going to be numbered on the side of the magazine, and they can be either side. But that's a general overview of the numbered magazines. Okay, our next variation is going to be the 9mm PP and PPK magazines. This is one of the easiest ones because from the beginning they were all marked 9mm. This is the early variation, has 6 holes. Later variation only has 1. If you turn them over, they all have the same holes. But I have no idea why, but early variation, and I can't tell you when it changed over. All I know is if you have a 9mm, either one of these magazines would be fine. It's real easy. From the beginning, they were always marked 9mm, and that's because, as I said before, 90-some% were 7.65, so when they made a 9mm, they always marked them 9mm. The other way to recognize a 9mm, notice the solid follower. We talked about the open follower. This is a 7.65. You can see this is just stamped sheet metal, and so there's a gap right here in the metal, stamped sheet metal. In the 9mm, it's a solid follower. Maybe that was just as extra reinforcement because the 9mm is more powerful. You can see the solid follower on every one of these as opposed to the stamped sheet metal. So a little bit stronger. The other thing to note that you'll notice is there's no notch. Now, the notch is for the push button release. Right here is the notch I'm talking about. And if I look at a 9mm pistol, obviously 9mm, bottom release magazine instead of the push button right here. Now the theory is that the push button, drilling a hole here, weakens the frame. And again, this is a theory. This has been told to me over the years by advanced collectors. The theory was that the push button weakened the frame. So for 9mm, they made it a bottom release magazine. And so that's how you can distinguish that. Now, you can see right here one exception. Right here. That one was notched. A good friend of mine, I've never seen one, but a good friend of mine collects 9mm, and over the years he has found 2 9mm with a push button mag release. Very, very rare gun, and I don't know if they ever made a magazine for it because this went to a push button and it looks like somebody cut that in and it was not factory made. So obviously this is a 9mm, somebody cut in the little notch. One other factory variation, there is a 7.65 that is bottom release. Some of you really smart people could shout it out right now. That's right, the PDM. PDM, which is Police Department of Munich, both PP and PPK. It's a 7.65, but it does not have a push button. It has a bottom release. I have no idea why, but they ordered it with a bottom release, and the magazine is not notched. So that's 7.65 without the notch, just like the 9mm. Okay, continuing along, now we want to talk about the 22 caliber PP and PPK magazine. I just said that the 9mm was the easiest because they're all marked 9mm. They all have a Walther banner, so it's really easy to tell the 9mm. The 22 caliber are by far the hardest because there is no Walther banner on any of them. There's no caliber on any of them. It's easy to spot a 22 caliber just because it has the distinct formation. It's just very thin. So you can tell the 22 caliber, but when there's no marking on it at all, it's very hard to tell if it's aftermarket, if it's post-war. The easiest ones are the early ones. They're 7-hole, and these were the earliest, so in the 30s, they made them with 7-hole, and if you look closely, you can see a 2-tone magazine. See that right here? There's a 2-tone magazine. I think if I turn it over, you can see it even better. See that 2-tone magazine? Just like the Colt magazines, actually, early Colt magazines had a 2-tone, and I think that was from the dipping process. It has a 2-tone magazine, 7-hole. This is early PP and PPK from the early 30s. Now, just before the transition, look, there's a thin lip, so we know this was about 1938, 39. Oh, by the way, the spring, there's no longer a zigzag spring in here. The spring is all loaded right here. And this is the same thing. It's a straight line without the zigzag spring. So it's just a straight spring, straight line. This is from the late 30s, probably into 1940. Then they added a different follower with a little, there's no button, but you can see it, there's no button, but I think you could put a tool in here and pull it down, but still no button. And now notice the zigzag spring. So when we get into the wartime, you can see the zigzag spring. There's a hole here, but no button. So I call this the straight line. I call this the no button. And then toward the end of the war, I think by 1944, they did have a zigzag with the button. All of the post-war magazines will have the button like this. But to be perfectly honest with you, I have a hard time telling if this is pre-war or, excuse me, wartime or post-war. It's really hard to tell. People ask me, how can you tell? I really, a lot of times, I can't tell the difference. Zigzag spring with the button. I do believe they made these late war. The only way that I might be able to tell is on the post-war, there is a chrome look to the follower. This one is a little bit duller, but it's not foolproof. And so it is very difficult, even for me, to know which is a post-war. They're not Walther marked, so I would assume somebody has made them since the war. And yet these magazines can easily sell for $150 to $200. So it's a big investment, and you want to, make sure you know what you're doing. The easiest thing is to buy one of these early ones, because then you know for sure that these were made back in the 30s, late 30s, and into 1940. So that's the 22 caliber magazines. If you have questions on those, feel free to email me. I'd be happy to help you as much as I can. And I do sell all of these magazines. If you're looking for a particular magazine, we do have them for sale. Okay, if you've lasted this long through this video now, you're in for a real treat, because most people will never in their life see a 25 caliber PP or PPK. They are so rare. They only made a very few of them. My contention is they were just experimenting in the market to see if they would be popular. These were so rare that all they did was take a 7.65 slide legend and etch in the 6.35. You can see here 25 caliber bore. All of them I've seen are etched in like that, and the numbers are so small. I think there's only about 10 PPKs known, and less than that, maybe 5 PPs known. I don't right now have a PP, but I do have the PPK. Now, just like they didn't have the slide legend, they didn't really have their own magazine, other than they took a PPK magazine. The holes are a little smaller. Here's a regular PPK magazine. Holes are a little smaller. But all they did was take a Model 8. There's a 25 caliber Model 8 Walther. They took the magazine from that and they put it inside a PPK magazine. I'm going to pause here for a minute and pull this thing apart, because it's a little tricky and I don't want to hurt it, because this magazine alone can be $1,200 to $1,500. You just never see them. Here, let me show you what I mean. I'm taking this bottom off, and underneath, of course, is the little guide. And look at that teeny spring. But what it holds in place is, there it is. See the Walther banner inside there? That's actually a Model 8 magazine. Fits just perfectly inside the tube of a PPK magazine. Now the holes are a little smaller, but this is generally a PPK tube. PPK tube. Holes are a little bit smaller. Again, here's the regular holes. And they slide that inside there. So when you feed it in, you can see that this is a Model 8 magazine that's inside of a PPK magazine. I hope that makes sense, but when that fits up in there, it feeds just fine. I have seen, probably of the 10 known, I've seen 3 or 4 of them, along with 2 of the PPs. Every one of them has the exact same thing. And now that is, it's not welded, but it is glued in there, or it's soldered. And I'd say that's soldered. That is soldered in there, so it's not coming out. It's in there pretty tight. This one, if you look at this one, if I took it apart, this is also a Walther 8 inside here, but the holes are bigger. And my guess is somebody made this up post-war. Not a bad idea. I mean, if I wanted an extra mag, I'll never find one. I mean, if you told me, if you contacted me and say, I'll pay you $2,000 if you can find me an original 25 caliber mag, I could probably look for the next 5 to 10 years and not find you one. So somebody made this up. It seems to work just fine, but if I took it apart, you'd see that there is a Model 8 magazine inside this PPK magazine, and it would go inside this gun. So that's a 25 caliber. You may never come across one, but that's how they made the 25 caliber magazine. Okay, if you've made it all the way to the end, congratulations. Some of you may have fast forwarded just because all you want to find out is how do I swap out the bottom. Let's say I get this magazine and I'm horrified because it was a Waffen-proof gun and should not have a finger extension, or it was a police gun. This came, let's say it came with a police Eagle C, and I know that it shouldn't have that bottom extension. I also know this bottom extension, by the way, is worth about 200 bucks. So why not salvage it? Also notice this is a Walther banner and a thick lip. If you've been watching this video, you think you're horrified. This is an early tube with a later bottom. So you'll notice this is a dull finish and this is shiny. But again, if you watch the video, the bottoms were usually high polished because it was exterior of the gun. This often was dull finish because it goes interior. But let's see how quickly we can swap this out. I used to use an ice pick all the time, but it does leave a little scratch in there, so to the ice pick. I got this instead, little paintbrush, but you just need a little wooden dowel of some kind. You see the button right there? All you do is push the button in. Now I want to use my thumb like a Pez dispenser. I'm going to push this in and push my thumb forward. Keep your thumb over the opening because as this comes off, if your thumb is not on there, this will fly up and this piece will hit you in the face. So this is the guide and the spring, and very quickly the follower falls right out. So that's what it looks like. Follower goes back in, spring goes back in, the guide, which is a little bit rusty, maybe when I take it apart, I oil it up a little bit. Push this down, and then you want to hold it down with your thumb. Sometimes it's hard to hold in place, so some people, I don't, because I usually do them really quickly, I'll put this through the hole, comes out the other side, and that kind of holds it in place a little bit for me. See that? But I often don't bother with that because I'm in a hurry. So I'm going to push this in. I'm going to pull this out. I just hold it like this. Again, you want to be below the rim, just like George Costanza's chocolate eclair.
Above the rim.
As long as it stays below the rim. Actually, he wanted it above the rim, but that's a whole Seinfeld episode you could watch. So I just take this bottom, get it started, hold this down as long as you can, push it, and then it'll pop in place. You just heard it click. Let me do that again really quickly. Push this down. Pull this off. Keep your thumb over it. Don't get hit in the face. Pulls off. Hold it down below the rim. Pop it back on again. And it pops into place. Okay? I hope you learned a lot from this video. It took a while for me to make and a while for you to watch, but I hope it's been worthwhile. Thanks for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe and share with somebody else who might need help with their PP or PPK magazine.